I'd like to thank Jay, who is joining us today. Together with me, it's Jay, who is a Senior Director for Global Services in Siemens. And I'm very happy to learn more from his experience. What exactly is Global Services? And maybe how do you get there, and who might be interested in that? Software, you probably know, for listeners, it's a massive space. Some statistics pointed at about 12 million people working in software. However, out of them, only about 1.7 million people, something close to that, work as software engineer. So the vast majority of software positions are actually not in software engineering, but in other type of position. And professional services is a massive industry in the software space. And I'm looking forward to hearing more about the many opportunities there and what it is. And maybe some fun facts about me and Jay. We both have two schools in common, MIT and Cal State Fulton. So I'm very happy to have you here. And maybe you can start with us as telling us, who you are and what do you do?
Sure. So again, my name's Jay Gorajia. I currently work at Siemens, the large conglomerate, but as you would expect, Siemens has a lot of different divisions. Some of them build trains, some of them are building and managing, power plants and stuff. So I work for one of the smallest groups, but focused on software. So what we do at Siemens Industry Software, which is what the division is called, is develop software for designing and manufacturing of products. That's our focus. The tagline revolves around building and designing products and leveraging the digital twin. I'm sure if you Google digital twin, you'll get 1,000 different hits on what it could mean. But at the end of the day, most of our tools allow our customers to design a product, whether it's a car, a plane, or some handheld device, whatever it may be, and how to virtually design it, the mechanical pieces, the electrical pieces, the electronics pieces, from the chip level all the way to the encasing and everything related to it. If you're talking about an automobile, everything from a caliper in the brake all the way to how the body's designed. In a virtual world, we have simulation tools. So how that will react to the real world. So whether that means aerodynamics, whether that means computational fluid type dynamics, in which we not only want to do airflow, but motion and motion resistance and weight effects on motion and all of the variances of there. Electronic design, how the boards and how the connectors, in the case of a car, it would be different ECUs, the electrical control units. How are they placed? Where are they placed? How the cabling between them would work? How do you design all of those? And what are those effects on a car? And then how do you design the box? And then how do you design the boards on the box? And we have tools on how do you design chips. So all of those things are tools in our portfolio of products. And then to manage all of that, you need a product called the Product Lifecycle Management Solution, and an ALM, which is an Application Lifecycle Management Solution. Those are also in our portfolio. So those companies that build automobiles and planes, they have to organize their data in some way. They have to figure out, okay, in this hierarchy of products from the little caliper all the way up to a car, what does that make it unique, and how is it characterized with all the different parts, bits and pieces, and who designs what, and where is it in its life cycle, and who's going to manufacture what, and what are we going to buy, and what are we going to manufacture ourselves. All of those decisions are kind of managed in a product lifecycle management system. And then all the software within it is managed in an application lifecycle management system. Many of you guys may have heard of some of our product is called Polarian, but we compete with Jira, we compete with requirements document management system from IBM called Doors and Rhapsody. So all of these companies are doing similar things, bits and pieces. And so our company develops software for all of that, plus on the manufacturing side. So when you have a factory, the data collection that happens on that factory floor, the planning of what machine should do what part of this body, let's say, how is that planned out? How are those recipes created? And what is the expected throughput for that particular line? All of that is also done with various software products within our company. So that's at a high level what Siemens Digital Industry Software does.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And one of the things is you're senior director for global services. Maybe you can walk us through first what exactly is the global services versus solution engineer versus professional services? Is this the same thing or different than professional services? And how the different people that are part of kind of the solution team, how do the different, what are even the different roles? I'm not sure that I always know. And the second thing is maybe how the nature of the work might be different than software engineering.
Great questions. So let's start out with the high level definition. So when I say global services, it's just our internal moniker for professional services. In a large organization, professional services has to have various different, organized in such a way that we can meet our clients where they need to be met, but yet also have enough structure in place so that we can have a repeatable process wherever it is, whether you're building in Brazil, Vietnam, the US, or China. You have similar processes, you have a similar definition. And that's the definition, that's the differentiation between the types of roles within, at least within Siemens. So we have professional services guys that are boots on the ground, so to speak. They're the ones that are in the country, speaking this local language, working with our clients. And I'll talk about what they're doing in a second. And then, so there's the country level professional services teams. Then there's what we call region level professional services teams. And then there's global. So what I do is I work for a corporate function. So I'm not associated with any particular region, country, or zone. I actually am in a corporate function, cutting across all of them, working on either strategic programs, large, let's say large clients that are named, and or defining standard processes and best practices that are then leveraged by those countries and different regions in order for them to execute on their clients and so on. So what does professional services do? In essence, our role is to take products that are developed by software developers or software engineers and the related teams, and make sure that the customer realizes value. So we have stated values that a product manager may have defined for a particular product or module or whatever software component. And then we have the related development processes. We're not involved with that, but then it's out there, it's available, and it needs to be sold. And so when we're talking about, pure, simple SaaS type products, then there's not much interaction necessary in order to land that deal. But if you have complex solutions like ours, where you're developing complex, you have to model complex requirements that the customer may need in order to best leverage your tools, then you need a professional services organization that can map out those business processes, define those challenges, define the outcomes that they're expecting, and then how to tailor those products and how to map an implementation strategy through adoption, maintaining, and perpetual usage through that life cycle. Somebody has to map it out. Somebody has to go through and say, this is what the customer wanted. We're going to deliver this. Hey, the customer got what they wanted. And that's what a professional services organization normally does. Hope that made sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's very interesting. So, software developers first, they build the product, and then when there is a complicated engagement, then there are professional services to go and complete the realization of value. Um, when we're looking into inside professional services, are all roles the same, or there is a variation of different roles? And in particular, like for example, someone who's joining professional services, can they expect to maybe travel to a client site for a couple of months and sit there with them, kind of understanding the problem and customizing it or making it work for them? Or what is kind of the different maybe functions in professional services, and what can one expect doing at each one of them, like what like their life would be like?
Sure. So first of all, professional services is like saying you're an engineer, right?
I agree.
There's tons of roles within that bucket. For our organization, we have mapped out tiered structures in which there's different types of roles. We have, and not only do we have different roles, but we have levels of roles. I'll give you an example. One of the roles is a solution architect. What a solution architect does is their role is to, their primary function is to translate a customer's business processes and their requirements to a functional spec that then can be used in order to drive an implementation process.
Mm.
That's what a solution architect does. We have associate solution architects, solution architect, principal solution architect, senior solution architect, and fellow solution architects. And you work your way up this tree, so to speak, or tiers, or I don't know how best to describe it, based on the complexity of the engagements that you've been, the years of service, and your ability to handle the complex, not only the complexity, but the scope of some of the engagements that allow you to work your way. So an associate solution architect may be able to handle a project of a certain size with a scope of a certain size, whereas a principal solution architect is expected to map solutions at an industry level. For example, we have guys that are experts in architecting solutions for the aerospace industry. So they understand the whole concept and the process of building a plane, for example. And then they have the ability to architect the different pieces for a new engagement or part of an engagement for a client because they have that domain expertise. So similarly, we have solution architects, we have infrastructure architects, we have learning architects, we have all of these roles across. And the other beautiful thing about it is, and you mentioned it earlier, software engineering itself may be a broad field, but they're quite pervasive. So we have a very large group that do DevOps. And that development and managing the development and the operations for a particular implementation, that by itself is a group within our professional services team because somebody has to do the requirements. That's a solution architect. We have product architects that are specifically tailoring a product that may be part of a solution. We have learning architects that will be, okay, let me look at what the overall arcing endpoint is and define a curriculum plan so that the customer can be not only onboarded, but they're adopting effectively and getting value out of the solution in their tailored environment, so to speak. We have implementation consultants that are, they tend to do a lot of the executing of the implementation plan. And then we have development and DevOps, so software engineers, software programmers, and operations guys that work through the actual execution of developing unique code or definitions of required things based on our SDK that may be available, and they're able to execute those. So quite a few roles within the bucket of professional services, but it takes a village to get a customer happy, and that's what you have to build.
Yeah, and thank you very much for that. I think, I mean, I was not aware of all the different opportunities there, so very happy to learn about that. I have a question about the domain, about manufacturing. So you have a lot of experience in working in software in the manufacturing. And one of the things that I wonder is that most people, when they work in software, they would work usually for like a PaaS company or a SaaS company, some company that might do databases or might do software as a service, CRM system, stuff like that. Is there a difference if somebody is speaking, let's say, the manufacturing domain, doing software there versus doing software in, let's say, I don't know, Microsoft?
Yes. The answer is yes, but I think it's in the how you execute motion. So let's say Microsoft has a lot of tools, and let's take, I don't know, Microsoft Dynamics, which has its business management tools, and then within the business management tools you have the opportunity to build something on Azure, which is their cloud, and they have the ability for you to develop connectors through Azure in order to do data analytics, right? So that's the Microsoft world. However, in order for that to be real in manufacturing, you need somebody who understands the manufacturing context of how those things would be used. What are those things that need to be developed for client A? If I'm a manufacturer of electronic parts versus a manufacturer of the body of an automobile, the requirements and what can be extracted from the different equipment and how we can gather that information and how best to use it in order to optimize an environment to build analytics in order to drive a business outcome is completely different, right? So in essence, there's always a need for somebody to have good understanding of technology, but where the rubber meets the road isn't when they understand the technology. It's when the technology meets the demand of a specific use case. That's when that happens. So that could be manufacturing, right? Manufacturing is just one piece. I've got friends that use the same products and they're in the financial industries, right? And completely similar technology, but yet they're doing completely different use cases with a different context for that technology. So that's where that becomes really important. Is there a role for anybody coming out as, let's say, a software engineer or many of the other roles that they may be coming out of universities or grad programs in manufacturing versus an Amazon or an NVIDIA or a Microsoft? Of course, right? Because there's understanding the technology and working on the core technology. And then there's let's make this for a business outcome at an endpoint for a particular organization. There's tons of opportunities there for companies that are manufacturing companies and or what we call OEM, original equipment manufacturers, like a Tesla, a Ford, a GM. All of these guys also manufacture. And they also need all of these guys that understand the technology and be able to do that in their context.
Interesting. It's like engineering used to be. It's like it was about solving problems.
Exactly. It
Using
still is.
solve problems.
Yeah, it still is. It's just that we have a lot more tools to do it with.
Yes. I do have one interesting question that I wondered. So you're now at professional services, professional services, global services, and when you graduated from Cal State Fulton, good university with electrical engineering. Could have easily went down the more I don't want to say the more common path, but though potentially more people in software engineering. What made you pick maybe to go with professional services? And what kind of maybe recommendation you might have for someone debating between those two? Maybe what are the pros and cons for going with one career track? And I know, by the way, professional services comes in different names, but I wonder being on the client side, solving their problems as part of product or platform that you have versus developing that product or platform.
Right.
How you thought about it then?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the beautiful thing about professional services is if you come out of almost any major, you'll find a job. And let me put that into context. I graduated with an electrical engineering degree. And in my first role, my first, let's say, professional services or services role, if you don't understand the field in which you are selling or implementing, you're not very useful to them. In my first job, I was in an electronics design company, what we call EDA, right? Electronic Design Automation. And they develop tools for electronics design. So it's the circuit board level design and chip level design. And I was working for a company that developed tools for them. So if you don't know electronic design, if you don't understand design basics, if you don't understand how electronics are not only designed but also manufactured, then how would you understand what their use cases are? How would you understand what their business problems may be? Because you don't even understand, or you may not understand right away, what context they're working in. Similarly, at least at Siemens, we have a huge group of mechanical engineers because a lot of our clients, Red Bull, for example, designs a Formula One car. And it's all about aerodynamics, body, weight, all of those things. Huge demand for that, right? But those are mechanical engineers. We have a massive organization that is focused around our ALM product tools, right? The application life cycle management. This is design, programming best practices. How do you help a customer or a client best design their DevOps? How do they best design how their software will be engineered such that they will have the outcomes that they need? Then you need software engineers for that, right? So I believe that even if you're at a crossroads of trying to decide what either type of engineer, or even between CS and engineering and all of those things, the beautiful thing about it is there are thousands of companies out there with thousands of problems. And as long as you understand the context in which they're working, you have value as part of the services organization.
Interesting. And what are maybe some reasons why someone would not want to be as part of the services organization? Maybe where software engineering might be preferred. Maybe I think we touched on like maybe travel is one thing. Maybe is that an issue, or is there any other reasons why you would want to?
There's plenty of reasons. So travel, of course, is one, but that's a mixed bag depending on what team you get into and whether you're associated to a strategic account or not. Then you may or may not have a lot of travel. But I want to touch on another thing that may be more relevant when deciding. Each role has a kind of a strength about it, right? Let's say software engineering, or even if you say any type of computer engineering. Even if you differentiate these two, right? One is more focused on trying to understand what is the best way to develop the best strategy on an outcome. Both of them are doing that, but one is doing it through hardware, one's doing it through software, let's say, right? Now, if you're a person that wants to work on a core product that is going to be available to the market, and you want to make this amazing product that everyone can leverage, professional services is not for you. Because in professional services, for the most part, your outcomes are targeted. I have a client, and that client needs ABC. We can guide them. We can consult them to say, these are the best things for your industry, for your particular product, or for your particular environment. But there are three main things that differentiate. One, what you work on may change every few weeks. You have to be comfortable with that. And many people are not. Right? Many people thrive on the fact that they can bounce around and do different things and talk to different customers and deal with different things on a weekly basis. And some don't. It's just how you're wired, right? So you have to understand that about yourself a little bit and say, I'd really like to work on something for a long period of time so I can make a difference. Fantastic. That's a very good outcome you may want, but that's normally not what services guys do, right? That would be more on, I want to be a work for a company in which we're always working on the same thing over a period of time. The second thing is the variability of end client negotiations. There are personalities that are great in front of customers, that are comfortable in front of customers, and they tend to thrive when they learn from or need to consult to customers and are comfortable in that area. And there's many that don't. They'd much rather sit in an environment where they're asked to have an outcome, and they're very good at creating that outcome, but they want to be doing that in a small group and or somewhat of a confine where they can focus on that. They're not bouncing around, which is point one, but more they're on their own. They can think and they can work their way through deep, complex problems and would prefer to do that. So that's another variable of thinking your way through it, is services, professional services as a group. Is that the right place to go? And the third one, of course, is part of the role of sales, right? And you have to be comfortable with that. You have to be comfortable with rejection. You have to be comfortable with the customer not liking your idea and you being okay with it. You have to be comfortable with customers saying, I understand that you have a lot of experience, but you don't know what you're talking about. And being okay with that. And working your way through that, because we do want a good outcome, because we're representing a company in order to get value realization for a particular solution. So you have to work your way through that. So these are the three big things I feel are the big nuggets to decide whether this is the right thing for you. And obviously not all services roles have all three, but for the most part, they kind of do.
Yeah, that was very interesting, but especially your point about personality. It sounds like almost the personality of, if you want to see it and program a certain model, is quite different than standing in front of clients and getting, again, to the sales is part of it, the context switching potentially between different engagement, that's another thing.
Right.
And some people thrive on this and some people may not, which leads me maybe to an area of a couple of questions is regarding getting a job in professional services. So if somebody, is sitting and thinking, sitting kind of in front of the computer, I actually like to go out and engage with clients, that sounds interesting, and trying to evaluate maybe their chance or the likelihood that they can do that, maybe it'll start with education. So when you're looking into professional services, you're in software, doing professional services in the area of manufacturing. So does a person like their degree? I think you mentioned the spectrum of education. Do they need to have a degree or an experience in manufacturing, in CS? Maybe it could be something very different. How do you think about kind of education, formal education?
Formal education perspective, I don't think it matters. And I'll explain why. I mean, we hire within Siemens, there is a general expectation for most of the roles, not all of them, but many of the role positions we have, you have to have an undergraduate degree. However, because we have such a large, diverse group, a portfolio of products, where that comes from doesn't matter, because you would be placed in that strength. So if you have a mechanical engineering degree, then we have a group that you would thrive in, because that's what they do. If you have electrical engineering degree, if you have a computer engineering degree, if you have a computer science degree, if you have, for example, a financial accounting degree, then we have a group that creates, we have a low code platform, and they do a lot of work with financial institutions to automate their transactions or their back end or their analytics. We need somebody who understands what those needs are in order to best understand and translate their requirements into specifications that we can then run with. So I would say professional services as a whole is probably the most flexible, because for sure we would recommend having an undergrad at the minimum. A lot of our professional services guys have at least graduate level education in them, and they tend to be the ones that end up processing with engagements with a lot, more strategic accounts and so on like that, because they have the more deeper domain expertise and or the more deeper understanding of the subject matter, so they can relate. But there's no hard fast rule of which major, and if your major is not related to a STEM major, maybe Siemens is not the right one, but there are other companies that are, which is fine, right? There's thousands of companies out there, all have professional service. I'd be surprised if there is an organization that does not have a professional services group. I can't even think of one, because whether you're a small company in which a professional services role is holistic, right? Hey, I'm your guy from soup to nuts. I'm gonna not only understand all your requirements, but I'll also be developing your solution for you, configuring the solution for you, and delivering it. As opposed to a large company like Siemens, in which we have it all divided into different roles, because we have that size and we need to scale at that level. So we need to scale all the different roles, so they're able to work effectively. Hope that answered the question.
Yeah, that answered the question. So as we talked about the degree, that could come from different direction, STEM preferred, and at least at Siemens. And talking about this, what makes a resume stand out? So what makes somebody who submits a resume have a high chance to get an interview versus maybe a low chance? Are there certain things to pay attention to besides, of course you always want to have like, finish with honors and stuff like that. But
Sure.
outside of that, what are some special things professional services resume that people like, that maybe you're looking for, or other people might be looking for?
So I'm in a unique position where I'm in kind of a corporate function. So most of my guys are quite senior. However, over the years I've hired at all different levels, from entry level on the way. And for the most part, I found myself looking for maybe four main things. There's a baseline criteria for every role, right? Minimum education, minimum experience, some sort of proof that you've done that. Great. Those are table stakes, right? You can't even play the game without that. For me, if it makes my desk, I'm already assuming that exists, because what's the point in applying if you don't even have that, right? The second thing is I need some sort of evidence that you're able to process what you've learned. Let me explain what that means. If you're in a role, let's say, like in my case, electrical engineer, right? And you have all the theory, that's great. And maybe you've been working in some sort of a design or some sort of an electrical engineering function for a bit. Have you been able to take what you've learned and applied it in a unique situation? That's not typical. That's not within the realm of, oh yeah, I'm that role, that's what I do, right? Because then that would fall into the first bucket. The second bucket is I'm looking for somebody who can say, you know what, I took the principles of ABC and was able to apply it here because it seemed like it was similar enough in nature. Okay, that's cool. That's great. You know, that points a little bit to creativity. The third area that I look for is, and I mentioned this earlier in this talk, personality matters. And there's no services teams, at least at Siemens, in which you cannot work on your own. You're always in a team. You're always working with others in order to have a joint outcome. And I need evidence that they're a team player. And very subtle things, right? Sometimes when I'm interviewing somebody, there's this tendency to say, oh, I did this and I did this and I did this and I did this, which is great because you do want to sell yourself. That's what an interview is. But I also want to say, and as a group, we accomplished ABC. And my role within the group was DEF. For me, if I hear those sentences, it's very important because now I know that not only do they work in a group and they're effective because they had an outcome, but they also understand their role in that group. Mm-hmm. Because not everyone leads a group. You can't have a group of 5 and all of them being leaders, right? They may lead certain aspects of the engagement, sure, but they themselves don't lead the group, or all 5 of them lead that group. So I'm looking for evidence of that. I'm looking for how they worked within a group. Were they effective in having an outcome? And more importantly, what was their role? I'm not interested in whether they were a superstar role or just a contributor. Either one of those is okay for me because they understand who they are and they understand how they contributed. And that's great. You know, it's my role afterwards, if I hire them, to then motivate them to see how we can grow and strengthen those strengths and strengthen those weaknesses in order to get them to be better. That's okay. That's my role. But I want to understand where they start. And then the last piece, the fourth pillar is personality. Like I mentioned earlier, we're customer facing. We're in front of clients all the time. We have to have conversations in front of clients. You have to have the ability and the comfort to speak well, to communicate your ideas well, and to not only, I don't mean sell as in, you know, you want to sell something, but to be honest enough that you're convincing a customer that your point of view is well-founded. Whether they agree or not, that's on them, but they should be well-founded, right? They're grounded, they're logical, and you're able to convey that, and you're able to accept the other point of view and work your way through that. That's what I would like to see evidence of. These are the four things I personally look for. I know other managers have less criteria, some maybe more, but that's what I look for.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was lots of good details, and probably a good segue to maybe the next question about interviews. So I never sat in a professional services interview, never was in one. And I wonder, for people who go into interviewing, what should they expect? Should they expect some behavioral questions? And if so, what these questions would be about? What is the areas that they are expected to shine on? Is this on communication, articulate clearly, creating trust, or what to expect in an interview, and how can maybe somebody ace that interview? Is there any preparations, any reading? Should they learn about the company, or how do you prepare to an interview and what to expect there?
Yeah. So I'll answer it by going back to my four pillars, right? Table stakes, you have to have the fundamentals down. But fundamentals also includes understanding who you're interviewing, right? If you're going to interview for Siemens and the division, the software division, this industry software division, I may ask one or two questions typically about, do you have a feel for what we do? Can you explain it to me? Because you should do your homework. If you want the role, then you have to do a little bit of homework. I would highly recommend that. When we talk about communication skills, for sure, that's one of those things where I recommend anything online, whether it's LinkedIn Learning or wherever you want to go for your learning, Coursera, Udemy, whatever, masterclass. Thousands and thousands of opportunities out there to learn. I would identify those courses that help you identify who you are. Because there are those that understand what their strengths are and their weaknesses. And it doesn't matter whether you say them or not. There are those that understand their strengths and weaknesses, and there are those that don't. And in at least my experience, if you don't understand your strengths, but you're trying to talk to those strengths, it'll show that you're not genuine about the fact that you have or don't have those strengths. So I would recommend that. I would recommend, all the other basics. I think everyone goes through, the basics of preparing for an interview and making sure they're communicating and looking the person in the eye and all that stuff. For sure, do all that. But if there was one key thing that I would ask you to do, or two key things I would ask you to do, is one, always research an interview. Who's the company? What's the role? Who are the managers in that company? What's the organization? Most of those things you can find out online one way or another. And the second thing is truly identify what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, because then there's probably 100 different behavioral questions that come at you. But if you understand who you are, it doesn't matter. You can answer honestly, and there'll be some level of genuineness to your response. You're not making it up as you go because you're not sure about your own ability pertaining to any particular aspect. So that would be my two key takeaways, other than the standard stuff that you should do in an interview.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And maybe for those who are maybe students and looking to get better, maybe resume, better understanding the problem space so they can talk about that. What are some advices you have for them? Maybe other internship or certifications, or how does somebody kind of collect this initial experience? Let's say they want to go into manufacturing, they want to go into, I don't know, insurance or something. Like, how do they even start? Assuming maybe the degree doesn't fit like perfectly into the problem space or the domain.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. There's a natural preference, at least for hiring managers, at least the ones that I engage with. There's a natural preference for someone who's already exposed to a particular environment or context, right? But what does that mean to you? Let's say you, as a student, are graduating with an electrical engineering degree. You could do a bazillion things, right? That you can be working for aerospace to automotive to mobility to whatever, right? There's 1,000 things you can do and 1,000 areas that you can end up with. What helps a lot, I find, are if there are areas that you're interested in, to dig into those. So, and even if that means a certificate course, or even if it means an additional 1 or 2 courses outside of the standard university curriculum, or even within the university curriculum, you've taken it even beyond what the standard curriculum is, so you can highlight that. I recently interviewed somebody, electrical engineer, standard, the baseline requirements, all good, everything. But he happened to take 2 additional certificate courses on cybersecurity. That was on his own. And what that allowed me to do is have a discussion about that. And that then allowed him to bubble up in the stack of resumes of everyone that had just electrical engineering, right? So you're already starting to differentiate yourself. I'll give you another example. One of my good friend's son graduated with a computer engineering degree. Again, lots of them out there. You can work pretty much anywhere from a Google, Nvidia, Microsoft, Amazon, whatever, all the way to specific companies that have specific needs. And he graduated with a music minor. I said, what, like, as it is, engineering loads are pretty aggressive. What's the deal with the music minor? And it's like, I enjoy it. It's a personal hobby of mine. And I figured, I know it's a few more classes, whatever, 6 to 8 more classes over the 4 years, but it allowed me to do something that's different, that I enjoy. And I just found out that he got a job at a company in which he's working on technology for sound processing chips. Now, there's probably 1,000 people that applied to that role as computer engineers or electrical engineers. He bubbled up to the top because he's got that mixture of things, right? He's got a music minor with a computer engineering degree. So now he had best of both worlds. He understands the acoustics piece as well as the design piece. So going back to answering the questions, we always prefer, as a hiring manager, somebody that's done more in a particular area that they're interested in. Then we know where to fit them within the organization.
Yeah, that's a good tip. So extra courses or extra activities, or basically indicating that you're actually interested in those clients and in that niche, and could be quite useful.
Exactly.
I have a question regarding picking companies. So when somebody picks companies, there is the domain of that company,
Sure.
There is potentially the size of that company, and there is the project. So let's say somebody would pick a certain, let's say a certain software type of project in a certain size of company in a certain domain, let's say manufacturing. when people pick the domain, how much of that is commitment to maybe stay within that domain long term because as the experience is being built, it's built in a certain domain. So when professional services, they grow the career, do they have a certain maybe affinity, I would say, a certain kind of closeness to say, okay, is that like some type of clients because you sold to them in the past? Is that some type of industry because you understand the problem? Is that certain size of company because you know how to operate within that scale? Or how can someone, as they pick kind of their first few companies, should think about, okay, what am I committing myself to? Or where's my switching cost if I'll decide to do something maybe a bit different? Or what's the pros and cons for
Right.
different areas?
Yeah. Um, I mean, I guess that speaks to the concept of transferability, right? How transferable is the skill set? Um, this one's tough for me, and I'll explain to you why. When I first started, I started with a startup, and now I work for a company that, just our division alone is 20,000 people. Siemens as a whole is 320,000 people, right? So I've seen the gambit, and for sure, when you get into a small company in a specific industry, it is less transferable in general, because it's just nature of the beast, right? A particular small company will be in a small niche for the most part. And there's exceptions to this, right? There's SaaS companies out there that have a slightly broader view. But when you get down to the brass tacks of executing, it tends to be niche, right? It tends to be a specific thing. If you're working for, I don't know, a SaaS company that does data analytics, you're not doing data analytics generically, right? You're going to be a specific type of data analytics around a specific technology, around a specific expertise and context. So small companies tend to be less transferable, but you tend to have a much more understanding of that context than somebody who hasn't. So is it transferable to other contexts? Not as much. But is it a transportable skill in general? Absolutely. There's 3 people on my team alone that have come from very small companies. But what they did was so good. They were so good at what they did. We needed that skill set on our team because of what they did, right? When you start with a large company, you get exposed to a huge number of connections, value. Then you get exposed to a lot of processes that have already been developed. And you get to work on things, but you're a cog in a wheel. So you may not be able to see the full picture of your value because you're one element in a large engagement or a large wheel, so to speak. And so is that transferable? Yes, because then they say, "Ooh, you worked for a Google. Great, awesome. Come on board." But you may not get the same level of position as the other guy because you don't know as much. Because that other guy had to do everything. He was in a small company, so he sees the whole picture. You may be able to execute as a big company very, very well, very effectively around a small area. Both have value. And that's why this question is really hard for me, because both of them are transportable. Both skill sets are transferable, but where the engagement lies is the difference. Small companies will give you a larger picture quicker of a niche environment. A big company may not give you that big picture because they've already figured it out. They've got processes for you. They've already figured it out because the engagement team is massive. and you just have to perform specific tasks.
Mm-hmm.
And you may be damn good at it, but that's where your experience is. So that's kind of the pros and cons of big versus small, in my view.
That makes perfect sense. So towards the end of our interview, maybe one before the last question. If there is somebody who might be considering professional services, maybe still like not sure, perhaps considering, maybe they like the idea of interacting with clients or something in the personality itself click. What would be, let's say somebody early in their career, maybe student, maybe they have some experience after that. What would be maybe kind of your top three? I know you have a lot and we discussed a lot in this interview, but your top three pieces of advice for that person.
I would say if they're already interested, if they already have established that this might be interesting, let's say, my advice, one, again, understand what you're getting yourself into. Whatever the company, the services that they, you can go on any company website and look under professional services or whatever they call their services group, and you will always see what they do. And everything is not made equal. And I'll give you an example. Microsoft has a massive professional services organization, but none of them execute. Because Microsoft, their strategy is to execute through partners. Then you take companies like Google or Amazon. Amazon's a great example. Amazon has a massive professional services organization, and they themselves execute. So just because you have two companies that are software companies that seem to do the same thing does not make professional services equal. It depends on their company strategy. Microsoft highly relies on their partner network in order to execute their services engagements. Amazon highly relies on their own organization to execute their projects. And so what you're interested in, what kind of things you want to do, you have to learn that. So that's number one. If you're interested in it, great. Figure out what you're interested in it, and to identify the right company, make sure that you're interviewing for a company in which, if you want to work on, if you want to work on cloud technologies and developing a stack for a cloud solution for a company, you're not going to get that at Microsoft. In the services group, obviously in the core product group, you would, but in the services group, you won't. But in Amazon, you would, right? And this is just one example of thousands of examples of you understanding what you want and understanding what services teams they have and the offers that they have. Every website will give you that. That's the easiest piece. Second is I would make sure that there's a match to the company you want to work for and where you want to go. This kind of goes back to that small company, big company discussion, and knowing yourself. Where do you want to go? If you're an individual that is a particular, they're skilled at a particular place and they just want to do the best they can doing what they know how to do, that's a very different outcome than somebody who wants to get in the job and then become a senior leader, or they want to be a business leader, or they want to go to the business side, but they know that they have to start on the technology side first and then work their way to the business side. What are my growth opportunities? In a small company, growth opportunities are very different than a big company, right? So what are those aspirations? And neither one of these answers is wrong or right? It's what you want to do. You can become, the classic example is, you have the Wozniaks of the world, deep technical guys. That's what you need to make products or solutions or make things happen. You have to have them. And then you have those guys that that are really good at connecting with clients and are able to make that translation and work their way in the business side. Also important. Both of these guys must exist for a company to work. So there's always a place. One is not better than the other, but you have to decide who you are and what you want. And I think that's the key. Where do you want to go? Who you are? Where do you want to go? Focus on that, other than, the first piece of understanding what type of company and what are the offers and what are the best places for you once you've figured out what you want.
Yeah,
That
that
makes sense.
that makes perfect sense. Yeah, thank you for this time. I learned a lot about an area that I thought that I knew, but apparently I did not know it as well. Now I know it a bit better. And just to finish, maybe a question about, if you were not in professional services, doing something potentially completely different, if things would maybe unfolded differently, what would you do now?
That's a good question. I'm again, more about this knowing yourself. The reason I have this role is because I don't know how to say this, and I'll admit it on YouTube globally.
Yeah.
I wasn't exactly the strongest technically. I relied a lot on the really strong people around me to make things happen. However, I realized I do enjoy speaking to clients. I do enjoy tough conversations about tough negotiating and really trying to define something new. I thrive on the little bit of the chaos that exists when you have a blank sheet of paper in front of you. There is no process around you, and you need to figure out how to make something happen. That's who I am, right? That's why I have this role, because I have to create processes that don't exist yet. And so what's the closest thing to that? Most likely I'd be in some sort of business management. I'm guessing, somewhere where I'm either running a company or most likely an entrepreneur in some sort of realm, because that's the kind of area I thrive in. Just, give me a blank sheet of paper and a really tough problem, and we'll figure out the people, the processes, the technology around it in order to make it work. So most likely an entrepreneurial type role or senior like business type role is probably where I'd be, my guess, presuming that the personality is the same.
That make perfect sense. Yeah, and it is require a lot to spend time in clients and difficult conversations and potentially context switch between different issues. So yeah, I do see how things relate. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate that. I learned a lot.
Problem.
I think that people that will listen will learn a lot too. And I thank you very much for this.
All right, no worries. It was my pleasure, and good luck for everybody who's out there working through it.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you, Jay.
Bye.